This is the story of a very special person, a man of God and of the theater. He helped to shape the cultural life of the nation. He touched and changed the lives of thousands of people, many of whom you know, and some whom you are about to see and hear. It is the story of Father Gilbert Hartke, a Dominican priest. For nearly 50 years, he was a vital and vibrant part of the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. He developed young talent and enriched the American theater. His gifts were legendary. His years of service created a legacy which endures in the drama department he founded and the university he served. Meet Father Hartke, the legend and the legacy. We were called up on stage by Father Hartke, and I thought, oh dear, here comes that pep talk, that lecture on what to do and how not to do it. And we gathered and waited, and then Father said quite gently and quietly, we're going to have a few moments of prayer. Well, that was something new to this old trooper, and it had a phenomenal effect. Gone with the nerves, gone with the butterflies in the stomach, gone with the terrors of what might go wrong. Strength flowed in. And ever after that, I have prayed before an opening night.
He was part Barnum, part Bosco, part Aquinas, and he juggled these roles so incredibly.
Father Hartke is an institution in Washington, known by everybody and loved by all. There isn't a door in Washington that Father Hartke cannot open. There are so many firsts that he's established through the years.
Every time I ever needed help, I called Father Hartke. If I ever needed anything, he was there immediately. I mean, just anything I needed. That's his nature.
So here's this fellow who just encouraged me in the very best way by just saying, I think you can do it, and I'll give you the opportunity.
He just made you feel as if there was a family there, and as if there was some kind of a home there, and as if he knew everything. And if he didn't know everything, he could bluff his way through the things he didn't know.
I met Father Hartke outside the music room, the old music building, and he came at me with those white robes, and I mean, he looked to me like John the Baptist on the mountain. I mean, he could have sold me, anything, no used car, life insurance, anything. But he came at me, and I told him my predicament. I said I was accepted at Yale. I thought I could get accepted here at Catholic U, but I didn't know what I was debating. He said, oh, no, you'll come here. You'll come here to Catholic U, that's all there is to it, and he walked away. And that was it. I mean, it was like, there was no question, that was it. I had to come to Catholic U. And he was like that about everything.
In 1937, the Catholic University of America gave a young priest the responsibility of establishing the first drama department at a Catholic university. Father Gilbert Hartke accepted his assignment with eagerness, pride, and enthusiasm. He was determined to create the best drama department possible. He approached the challenge the way he approached everything in life, with the throttle wide open. He was a perpetual optimist. Throughout his life, he remained convinced that no matter how difficult the undertaking, in the end he would prevail, if only because he refused not to succeed. It was an attitude that served him well. For nearly 50 years, Father Hartke served as administrator, director, teacher, friend, and spiritual father to the thousands of students who passed through the drama department of Catholic University of America during his tenure. He was the catalyst for the National Players, the nation's oldest classical touring company. He led the Olney Theater to recognition as the official state summer theater of Maryland. He sent companies around the world for the Department of Defense and took students behind the Iron Curtain to perform. He enlisted the very best professionals to perform and lecture at Catholic University of America and raised funds, some said, even while sleeping. All of what Father Hartke accomplished continues at CUA. The quest for excellence that he instilled in his students and faculty is woven into the CUA experience. The drama department continues to flourish, pursuing the same high standards that served as Father Hartke's touchstone. The fundamental idea that every student, regardless of how much artistic talent he or she has, graduates from Catholic University of America with a fuller understanding of themselves as members of society. For while the university is a laboratory where young people can experiment and experience success and failure as they learn the demanding art and craft of drama,
I think you can give your body more permission to be involved in the life of the scene and not to be intimidated by the demand of the music.
Catholic University of America remains first and foremost a training ground for the theater of life, preparing people to do their best, no matter what endeavor they ultimately pursue.
You know, when I walk through CUA's campus, I feel the spirit of Father Hartke everywhere. Everywhere. I was one of Father's kids. Just like every student in the drama department belonged to his family. He was a big part of my young adulthood, and he influenced my whole life, just as I'm sure he did the lives of everybody who came in contact with him. Just as he's influencing today's students, who experience his touch through the new faculty and staff who carry on the traditions that Father Hartke established at CUA. But you know, for me, Father Hartke's influence, his greatest influence, was not as a teacher. In fact, there are those who say, and I have to agree with them, that as a classroom teacher, Father Hartke left a lot to be desired. But what he did for me, and I'm sure for countless others, was to make me feel like I could do anything. Maybe it was nothing more complicated than positive thinking. But it worked for him, and it worked for thousands of people who came within his range. His approach might have been simple, but it was effective. And it had a profound effect on the drama department and the entire Catholic University of America.
Even as a boy, Father Hartke was a go-getter. Born in Chicago in 1907, he was the youngest of 8 children. Early on, he was drawn by the drama and pageantry in both the church and the theater, and sought ways to combine them.
He was good, he really was. And people couldn't believe he was going to enter the priesthood because he was so talented as an actor.
Father Hartke's calling was never in doubt. From the time of his first communion, he went to Mass every day and often served as an altar boy. It gave me a sense of completeness, he recalled many years later. I recognized that God wanted me to be a priest. But if God wanted him to be a priest, he was equally determined that Gilbert Hartke should use his dramatic talents. The S&A studios are not far from the Hartke family drugstore in Chicago. Charlie Chaplin, Mabel Normand, Wallace Beery, Gloria Swanson, Ben Turpin, Francis X. Bushman had made films there before moving to Hollywood. Gib, as he was called, was running errands for the drugstore when he was noticed by a continuity writer for the studios who brought the boy to the attention of the movie makers. The movie makers recognized the youngster's talent, and at the age of 7, he was acting in 2 reel films. When he wasn't in front of the camera, he was staging plays with his brothers and sisters, serving as director as well as one of the actors. By the time he was in the 8th grade, he had decided on a career in show business. In high school, however, he concentrated more on football than the stage. It was when he enrolled in Providence College that his twin loves of church and drama first merged. He joined the Order of the Preachers, also known as the Dominicans, correctly assuming that the Dominicans would put his speaking and dramatic skills to their best use. During his first year of seminary training, he was assigned to produce 6 plays, an early test of his organizational skills that he passed with honors. The year before his ordination, in 1936, Father Hartke went to Catholic University in the nation's capital to study for a master's degree in English, which he received in 1937. That same year, the university decided to open a graduate division of drama within the English department, and Father Hartke was asked to take on the responsibility. Never one to say no, Father Hartke welcomed the opportunity with his customary enthusiasm, and despite no budget, went about the business of establishing the first drama department in a Catholic university in this country.
You can imagine what it must have been like to go, some 50 years ago, to go to Catholic University, the powers, the seat of Catholic education in America, and say, we're going to have a school here, and we're going to give a degree in drama. Now, up to that time, in most schools, as you may know, you didn't get a degree in drama. You joined the drama club. You know, there was like a theater club, and after school, they did little plays. But no one had ever thought about giving a degree in drama. That wasn't thought of as a likely subject for a degree. But he was convinced that that was what he was going to do, and then he did it. Then he brought some incredible people to be around him, Walter Kerr and Leo Brady and Dr. Josephine Callan, and all these experts in their fields. And he did it by being so compelling and so charismatic.
A small faculty, but a very rich one, I would say. And that, of course, was a matter of fathers having brought together a certain group of extremely, workable people.
They had no permanent quarters and had to make do with whatever facilities were available. But even in the department's infancy, Father Hartke was able to enlist professionals to help train his students. In 1939, Orson Welles came to Catholic University of America to address the first class of drama students.
Over the years, Father Hartke invited other notable actors to meet with the students, including Sir John Gielgud, Geraldine Page, Elsa Lancaster, Geraldine Fitzgerald, Gregory Peck, Carol Channing, Grace Kelly, Mercedes McCambridge, and the members of the Old Vic Company.
Helen Hayes was one of Father's biggest supporters. They were close for more than 55 years. They met when she was touring in Victoria Regina, and he was a student at Providence College. He was so impressed with her performance that he went backstage and introduced himself. They maintained contact ever after. In 1964, she lived in a campus dorm at Catholic University of America while preparing a new play, William McCleary's Good Morning, Miss Dove.
And I remember before I came down to work with him, my fellow Catholic actor, Cyril Richard, said to me, I want to warn you that the good father is something of a ham. And he said he'll go on stage and he'll make a long speech before the curtain goes up, and he can't stop. And he'll wear the audience out, and you have to pull them back up out of their exhaustion.
Miss Hayes worked hard during rehearsals. Like with any appearance, she wanted to play her part as well as she possibly could. But she felt a special commitment to the students at CUA, and it went beyond merely acting in a play. It was the same commitment, the same desire to teach the difficulties and the heartache of the theater through the power of example that other well-known professionals have felt when working with the students in CUA's drama department.
Years later, in 1971, Helen Hayes made the last stage appearance of her career at the Hartke Theater, playing the role of Mary Tyrone in Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night.
But I was happy. I was blissfully happy that I lived in that play for a couple of weeks. And it was a wonderful, particularly wonderful thing, because then I never acted again on the stage.
In 1939, Leo Brady and Walter Kerr wrote Yankee Doodle Boy, which was Father Hartke's first success at Catholic University of America and served as the inspiration for the Warner Brothers movie Yankee Doodle Dandy, which starred Jimmy Cagney as George M. Cohan.
Brady and Kerr wrote another musical, Count Me In, which went to Broadway before Kerr became the drama critic for the New York Herald Tribune. and later, of course, for the New York Times. In all, 3 CUA musicals have been produced in New York. And in the first 13 years of its existence, the drama department sent 9 plays to Broadway.
When we decided to do a musical based on the life of George M. Cohan using his own songs, it was called Yankee Doodle Boy, and it was really that kind of attention-getting success that got us off and going, really. But there wasn't any money to produce it, unfortunately, and it was a musical, and with a lot of scenery and a lot of costumes and so forth. And Father turned to Josephine and said, "Well, what?" She says, "Well, here," and gave him the money.
When World War II broke out, Father Hartke was studying at Northwestern University for a doctorate in speech. In the spring of 1942, he returned to Catholic University to try and hold the department together, even though students were leaving for war service. Later that year, he starred in a short film for RKO Pictures called Army Chaplain that was shown throughout the world.
But back at the university, Father Hartke was determined that the drama department should have permanent housing on campus. So he located a government surplus theater at a naval base in Norfolk, Virginia. A judicious application of his legendary charm resulted in the government selling the theater to him for $1, a buck. He had it trucked to Washington where it was reassembled, and it served as university theater for 17 years. On Ash Wednesday in 1967, a heavy snowfall caved in its roof. It was a Lenten entertainment that year. But for the following 3 years, the department was back where it started from, in temporary quarters. As he did with other obstacles, Father Hartke transformed disaster into opportunity. Instead of brooding over the loss of the theater, Father Hartke envisioned in its place a modern facility incorporating office, classrooms, rehearsal space, and 2 theaters. After years of intensive fundraising, the building of Father Hartke's dream was completed. The premiere production was directed by and featured Cyril Richard in George Bernard Shaw's The Devil's Disciple. On opening night, the president of the university announced that the new complex would be known as the Gilbert V. Hartke Theater. Father Hartke approached everything he did with the same optimism and constantly sought ways to improve the department.
Father Hartke had an ability to conjure projects, and once he got a vision as to what would be good to do, it was very hard to dissuade him. And I found that energy exciting. He'd say, "This is a good idea, let's do this." And whether it succeeds or not is not relevant. It's whether or not it's worth doing.
He was incapable of saying no when confronted with a challenge or a request for help.
When the man who owned Omni Theater came to him and said, "Can you operate a professional theater?" Father said, "Yes." And when he's asked by the University of Poznan in Poland, "Would you send a group over?" he says, "Yes." And when the Department of Defense says, "Can you put together a little show for a Christmas tour?" he says, "Yes."
People who knew Father Hartke and worked with him, they knew that unlike many dreamers, Father Hartke was a man of action. He was very careful to gather faculty and staff who were like him, who were as committed to the university and the drama department as he was, and who had the same tireless energies and devotion to helping young people achieve their dreams.
Any young man or young woman who came here for an education in the context of the Department of Drama came here with a good deal of potential, and the realization of that potential was indeed a revelation of God's goodness. I think he saw it that way, and I think that's what we want to preserve here.
Long before he launched the fundraising drive that built the Hartke Theater Complex, Father Hartke established other programs that were innovative in concept and application. In 1949, he established the National Players as a nonprofit organization, and it is now America's oldest classical touring company.
And Players has brought Shakespeare, Moliere, Aristophanes, Sophocles, to several million Americans, mostly young Americans, who had not seen their works before and discovered them and were moved by the experience of the discovery. We have had approximately 450, at least 450 men and women go out with National Players. the majority of those people are working in professional or educational theater. At least 90% of them would say that the tour was one of the richest, most beneficial experiences of their lives.
And I think even better than all of that, though, is what they have done to bring young audiences into the theater. When I was here the first time and watched 4 days of performances sell out at this theater, and that's 1,600 seats, of young kids, and watched their eyes just practically bulge with joy at seeing Shakespeare. And that's something. And when you see young kids suddenly come in and hush as they watched it, Romeo and Juliet, or as they watched Othello, and see their fascination with the theater, we know that we'll have an audience of the future.
Since its inception, the National Players Company has traveled more than 1 million miles, performing plays in universities, colleges, high schools, and community arts centers for over 2 million people.
I think that's why the National Theater Corporation was so glad to have the alliance with the National Players, because we're all involved in theater audiences of the future. And that's exactly what's happening with this marriage. We're bringing new people into the theater, and also hopefully encouraging the National Players people to continue on in this wonderful business and to perform more at the National. That's what we want.
In 1950, the president of St. Michael's College in Vermont asked Father Hartke to operate a summer theater. Although he'd never run a professional theater, and Vermont was a long way from Washington, he readily agreed.
He saw the request as an opportunity. It was an opportunity for his students to get performing experience. So over the next 20 years, what began as an annual 3-month summer stock season evolved into a respected fine arts department and a professional theater managed by graduates of the CUA drama department.
In 1951, President Truman asked Father Hartke if it would be possible to do something to entertain the troops in Korea. Father Hartke, of course, said yes. As a result, the National Players traveled to a war zone, where they entertained soldiers with Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost.
I waited until I thought the show was over, and I called the Special Services, you know, on my little ever-ready ring-up phone, and got hold of the Colonel. And I said, "Oh, hi, Colonel Gaffney, how are you? How'd it go?" "Great, wonderful." I said, "Wonderful? Really?" "Yes, it was absolutely fabulous." "How many guys did you have?" "Oh, we had about 3,500. 3,500 to come see Love's Labour's Lost? Well, I hear this enormous laughter on the other end of the line. And I said, "Hey, what are you laughing at? What's going on?" And he said, "Skippy, you and the sergeant did us a great favor. You know, that sergeant never did understand what it was you said." So all the publicity went out. Love, labor, and lust. Girls, girls, girls. We had a packed house.
Out of the Korean experience, the Armed Forces Professional Entertainment Program was established. Since then, National Players companies have performed at military installations in the Arctic Circle, Japan, Europe, the South Pacific, and the Middle East. Since 1968, the department has participated in Defense Department tours by sending its annual Christmas show to entertain servicemen in Europe and the Orient.
In 1953, C.Y. Stevens, a Washington entrepreneur and owner of the Olney Theater in Olney, Maryland, a suburb of Washington, asked Father Hartke to assume operations. Father Hartke continued the Olney Theater's successful record of stage presentations, and Stevens subsequently turned ownership of the theater over to the non-profit entity established by Father Hartke.
The man who made it possible for us to operate the theater, and who later gave us that theater, Mr. C.Y. Stevens, told us in 1956, after 4 seasons of operation, "I'm glad you made it financially feasible to operate, because if you hadn't done it this year, I was prepared to sell it." We didn't know we were in a critical year, 1956, but the season was very successful. So he allowed us to continue the operation. In 1960, he said, "You fellows really know what you're doing with this. I'm going to give it to you." Because we had achieved, apparently, the quality of theater he had always imagined was possible at the Olney. Of an ensemble, a group of people working together to do plays for people, not interested primarily in profit, but in providing good entertainment in a theater. So the state of Maryland recognized the contributions of Olney Theater after some 25 years, and the Assembly in Annapolis voted to recognize Olney Theater as the state summer theater of Maryland.
This theatre is clearly providing a need in the area. As we speak, there are no professional theatres functioning in Baltimore, and so the nearest theatre they've got is this one in Olney, and clearly from the size of our houses and the vigour of the repertoire here and the work being done, there is a need for this theatre, and the fact that it's been here for 40 years proves that again, doesn't it?
It is now one of the 6 major art institutions of Maryland, the only one outside of the city of Baltimore. In 1958, Father Hartke was invited by the State Department to send a company to Latin America as a participant in President Eisenhower's International Program for Cultural Presentations. In 1965, a similar invitation was issued by President Johnson, and students toured Israel and Europe with Eugene O'Neill's Ah, Wilderness.
When we were in Israel, and just so that we could have some humor, we had a day off in Caesarea, and we all went on the beach. It was a gorgeous day, and Father told the lifeguard that we were on a break from filming Neptune's Daughters. And the rest of the day, that lifeguard bombarded us with questions about Hollywood, to which we had to make some sort of reply. And I don't think he ever knew what he caused by saying something like that, but he was always one to do the unpredictable thing.
In 1974, Father Hartke took the first student group to Romania, where they again performed Ah, Wilderness. In 1969, Father Hartke began sending teams of drama department graduates to teach and perform in Poland under State Department auspices.
But he was always interested in sending the kids overseas with a show for the USO, or seeing that they went down to the White House to meet the president, and a lot of things like that. I mean, he was always dreaming up something to get us more and more interested in the whole theater life.
In addition to taking on enough projects to keep several people occupied full-time, Father Hartke was busy molding a generation of actors, playwrights, directors, and technicians, many of whom went on to achieve positions of prominence in the legitimate theater, as well as in film and television.
Father was had so many roles, if you think of it. He was a chief executive officer. He was a chief operating officer. He was a recruiting officer. He was a fundraiser. And he directed 3 enormous organizations: the department, the Players Touring Group, and 2 summer theaters. And he did all of these things while he was teaching and while he was still being a priest.
But you learned that he had a handle on everything that was going on. He had a handle on everyone there. He knew what was going on. And then the great discovery, one day you found that he knew you. He knew you.
The secret of Father Hartke's success may have been that his influence and positive attitude rubbed off on everyone who came in contact with him. He had the ability to make people utilize whatever talent they had to its absolute fullest.
He really influenced people, and people were better because they knew him. And he had a way of I think, making you realize your own potential. And he treated people with great dignity, and he had a wonderful personal approach to people. And I think that more than anything else, is why he was successful.
He was a father confessor, he was a friend, he was a big brother, he was a grandfather, he was an authoritarian, he was a teacher. Every level of your life was important to him. And he got you involved in so many things that you never thought you ever wanted to be involved in or didn't think you could get involved in. I always said that Father would always encourage you to do the things you wanted to do. And if you didn't know what you wanted to do, he'd tell you what you should do.
He was able to bring out the best in his students. He could see beyond what they themselves might perceive as failure to what they were ultimately capable of achieving, not only as professionals in the performing arts, but as human beings. He had the rare knack of transforming negatives into positives and achieved results with encouragement rather than strict discipline and harsh criticism.
He was the sort of person who brought out the good things in you, made you see what is so worthy about yourself, why you can do this role or do this task like no one else can, simply because you are who you are.
The list of people Father Hartke trained is studded with impressive names. Jason Miller, he wrote that championship season. Mart Crowley, he wrote The Boys in the Band. John Pielmeyer wrote Agnes of God. Jean Kerr, who met her husband Walter Kerr while she was a student in a class he taught, wrote Please Don't Eat the Daisies and Mary Mary, and a number of other successful Broadway comedies and screenplays.
I guess if Father did anything for me, he really did that. I mean, it was the most important thing that anybody could do for me, was to show me what a wonder the theater is and can be. Father really, really injected that into me, and I fell in love with the theater.
If Father Hartke inspired people to write, he was just as profound an influence on young actors. John Voight, Susan Sarandon studied at CUA. So did Philip Bosco, Ed McMahon, Chris Sarandon, Bibi Osterwald, Susan Anspach, Jane Summerhays, Barbara Andres, among others. Pat Carroll, who worked as a comedian for many years, created and toured in her highly acclaimed one-woman show, Gertrude Stein, Gertrude Stein. Frances Sternhagen went from CUA to the Arena Stage, a well-known Washington repertory company, and then to Broadway, where she won a Tony. Henry Gibson starred in Laugh-In, one of television's most original and successful comedy shows. Robert Milley went from playing Horatio in Richard Burton's Broadway production of Hamlet to a successful career in television.
The experience at Catholic U was absolutely, without question, the largest single effective contributing factor to my success. I did enormous work down there. You can imagine, can you appreciate the range and the extent of stuff I did? I mean, I was constantly acting from the time I was there.
But the most important lessons Father Hartke's students learned from him were not so much about acting as they were about life.
Father's best teaching was never in the classroom. With Father, you learned by example. You couldn't really take the classes that seriously. I mean, they were surreal in many ways. Father would grab his notes and come in 5 minutes after the hour, and he'd glance through them, and then at us, and he'd say, "Space." And then we were to take a few minutes to imagine what he meant. He said, "It must be filled." Well, this could be mysterious, or we didn't know what it meant. Then he would talk about motion. And then he would talk about the most abstract concepts you'd ever heard, but in as few words as possible. And he said, "We will go into this further next week," and disappear. Father's teaching was an example.
Or the ways he encouraged them, lifted their spirits when they were down, or helped them out with a phone call or a nudge in the right direction.
Father Hartke, in the middle of a busy day, when you were maybe mimeographing scripts or typing the sides then, I think, before we mimeographed them, would say, I think you're all working too hard. Come on, we're going for a drive. And you'd hop in the car and he'd take you to Ocean City, Maryland. Or he'd take you to see the apple blossoms. Or he'd take you out for hot chocolate. He just knew. He could see pressure points.
First job was at Lyndon Johnson's house. Apparently, he just called up somebody, and there we were. And the week after that, we were at Bobby Kennedy's wife had a garden party, and we were singing there. And from then we were scheduled to do the White House, and we did USO tours and all that, and it just all happened, I guess, from a phone call.
Despite the temptation of success and friendships with powerful and prominent people, Father Hartke never lost sight of his vocation and its duties.
The essence would be in his holiness and priestliness, and in this virtue of compassion where he reached out to everyone as he was teaching, as he was preaching, as he was directing and as he was on the road in his famous role as a PR man. So, but I think over all of this, the reason behind everything that made it so appealing and made him so effective, and why he will live forever, comes from his priesthood.
He had a heart for communication, and he had an ability to draw communication skills out of others and then to point them all in the direction of the glory of God. That's the way he lived his life.
Father Hartke treated everyone he met as if they were special, which, to him, they were.
But I kind of wanted to be in a good drama department, so I'd gone there. And he was just terrific. He was very receptive to me, and I guess he's that way with everybody. It's like people feel a special relationship with Father Hartke. And I felt it right from the very beginning, that I thought he liked me a lot and thought he recognized my talent and all of this stuff, you see. And all he was doing was showing me the building, you know.
But it was his students who meant the most to him. He referred to them as his kids, and they referred to him as father, often more in a paternal rather than a spiritual sense.
I truly have always felt like one of Father's children. When I came to Catholic University 20 years ago or more, that struck me as kind of funny. The fact that I'd be in a room with a group of adults and we'd be asked, whose kids are you? And we'd say, we're your kids, Father. I don't think that exists anywhere in the world. It made us feel like there was somebody there who truly cared about us.
And I think in a business where you need confidence, where you need self-confidence to survive, being Father's kid gave you a tremendous leg up, a lift on that stage. When you walked up there, you knew you were special. And if you start acting that way, all of a sudden you win those parts and you get everything because you are special.
For many students away from home for the very first time, he was a surrogate parent as well as their mentor. Years after his kids graduated, he remembered their names and the names of their parents. And you felt as if he'd always kept track of you. And it was true that once you became one of Father's kids, you remained one forever.
He said he was going to introduce all of the freshmen to the rest of the school. And I thought, well, this guy doesn't know me. I mean, what's going to happen here? So he starts down the line. There must have been 40 of us. And he goes down the line, and he knows all these people's names, and he's getting closer and closer to me. We're like, oh, he doesn't know me. It's going to be so embarrassing. And he goes, and this is Charlie Lang. And I was shocked.
He never forgot the people who studied with him, whether they went on to stardom or ended up in less lofty circumstances, whether their potential was large or small. He encouraged them with equal enthusiasm, preferring to concentrate on what they could do rather than on what they couldn't do.
You see, he could laugh at himself. And if he could laugh at himself, then he taught us that we could laugh at ourselves. Not to take it all so damn seriously. That life was more important than career. That being a decent human being transcended the other things. I think you can't shake that. Some people may say it's a sickness and that it inhibits ambition. I don't think it inhibits it so much as it humanizes ambition. And I think that's the greatest gift that he gave any of us.
He treated them all with great care, more like family members than students who were momentarily passing through his life. He brought sweet rolls to rehearsals.
We were rehearsing Lords of Wonder, and we were in church, and he comes up with this fantastic chocolate almond cake. I mean, and we're there sitting in church eating this cake. The rehearsal, of course, stops. I don't know where he gets these things, but he's always coming in with something. Comes bearing gifts.
Frequently, he treated students to a steak dinner at Duke Zebert's, a landmark Washington restaurant where Father Hartke was often seen having lunch with a variety of prominent Washingtonians.
He just rolled along like Old Man River. He just kept rolling along. And I've seen people, you know, he'd be sitting eating, you know what I mean, and people would come over and he would just love it. He would just love it. He just loved people.
One night he was at a party and there was a person there who didn't know him at all.
And some man who had had a few drinks, and he heard Father Hartke mention these names. And so the guy came up to Father Hartke. He was very rude. He said, "You're quite a name dropper. What are you dropping all these names for?" And Father Hartke looked at the man and said, "As Noel Coward once said to me."
Many years ago, he started this group going to Europe. He had these students going to Europe. And Father would come to me and say, "You know, I have 20 kids. They're leaving for Germany. They're going to entertain the troops." He says, "I have to do something for them." I said, "What would you like to do, Father?" He said, "I'd love to give them dinner." I said, "That's fine, Father. How much do you got to spend?" He says, $3, including tax and ticket.
He used to come into my office quite a lot, and I saw a lot of them. But he'd somehow always pull out of his pocket either a dime and a nickel or some pennies or something. He said, "My heavens, I haven't got enough to get me back to the university." And I would say if he did that gesture once, he did it 50 times.
Here you have a doer. Father was always the doer. He'd roll up his sleeves and go out and do it. He didn't just talk about it or think about it. He was active.
Yes.
And I think that was the reason that most of us admired him so. He had enough guts to get out and do it.
I've said a priestly man with a touch of sainthood about him. I love what Mel just said. He came from another planet. He's on another planet now, and we know that. I'm sure he's happy.
Father really had a national stature. He had an effect on cultural life and on social life in Washington. And these two gentlemen were part of a group that worked on desegregation in Washington in the theaters and many other things, you know, that not everyone at the university even realizes about Father.
Well, Father was extremely involved all over Washington, all over the world, in fact, with all the famous people of the day, all those decades that he was there. The amazing thing was that a lot of us thought he was a name dropper when we first met him because we didn't know where he found the time to meet all those people. He seemed to be there for us all the time. Anytime you needed Father, he was at your beck and call. He would find time for his students.
More often than not, he was raising funds for the department, an activity that he carried out with endless zeal. His eternal quest for funds stemmed from his desire to make the drama department as good as it could possibly be. And he constantly sought to create new opportunities for his students. If he made a promise, he always carried it through. Students knew that once he made a commitment, he wouldn't stop until he reached a satisfactory conclusion or found somebody else who could. He was especially concerned with young people from families that had limited funds. The fact that a lack of money kept many young men and women from attending college was a painful fact of life that he wrestled with all his life. One of the ways he attacked it was by providing scholarships through a special project called Father's Fund. Established in 1953, the fund, now known as the Hartke Endowment, provides faculty support and artisan residency as well as scholarships for students who otherwise couldn't afford to attend CUA.
Father Hartke's influence reached far beyond the walls of Catholic University of America. The tradition of excellence he established in the drama department contributed to elevating Washington from the ranks of a whistle stop for Broadway-bound productions into a city with its own dramatic community. He left a legacy of achievement that continues under the direction of his successors, many of whom received their early training from him. A number of Father Hartke's students emulated him by establishing drama departments and programs at other Catholic schools, including Loyola Universities at Los Angeles and Chicago, Fordham University, Marymount College, LaSalle, Rutgers, Seton Hall, and Notre Dame. His spiritual influence prompted several dozen students to become priests and nuns, an extraordinary number for any parish in this country.
I think Father, although we all talk about what a magnificent star he would have been if he had chosen the theatrical profession as his own path in life, I think his choice, his vocation, has shed its light on all of us who were fortunate enough to be at Catholic University at any small or greater part of our lives. Father shared himself, he shared his priestly vocation, and he shared that tremendous sense of the joy in work theatrical and the joy in life itself. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Not only Catholic University for having given me a very short but a most intriguing stay, but to Father for having kind of dug the earth and gotten that department really solid and really heavy. I think we're all now, and all of those who have come behind us at whatever point we were there, and all of those who will come in the future, will have to remember the name, Father Hartke. I always shall.
When Father Hartke died, a powerful light went out. His love, his sense of humor, his encouragement, his untiring selflessness lit the way for thousands of young people, Father's kids, who even in adulthood or in middle age remain just that, part of this Catholic University family. Many of them have gone on to cast their own large light, which reflects back on Father Hartke's memory and the Catholic University of America, which is dedicated to continuing the traditions established by this unique man, educator, and priest.
I mean, I can't think of him as not being there, but I think it's a symptom of the world that you just don't produce somebody like that anymore. I mean, I think they really broke the mold with him.
And every time we do a performance, we gather around and we say a prayer. And at the end of the performance, we say, St. Genesius, pray for us. And we say, Father Hartke, pray for us. And people who don't know Father Hartke, for some reason, I still feel like he's up there praying for us, even though I've never met him.
Once, when he was asked what his personal philosophy was, Father Hartke replied that God's work includes striving for personal excellence. The wonderful thing about the performing arts is that it is yourself against perfection. You have to be as perfect as you can, whether you act, write, produce, direct, or design. You aren't in competition with another show or medium. You're in competition with yourself.
The pursuit of excellence. That is the key to understanding Father Hartke's life. He instilled his high standards in everything he did, every activity, every program he instituted here at Catholic University of America. And those who follow him will pass the torch to those who follow them, lighting the way for each succeeding generation of students, the students who meant so much to Father. There is no better way to honor the memory of Father Gilbert Hartke, who meant so much to so many people and to the Catholic University of America.
One job that I particularly loved was acting as Father's chauffeur. And I guess I liked it because it was role-playing. Wear the smart-looking little cap and drive him around Washington in his blue Cadillac. And one day you'd be taking him to the White House or the State Department or an embassy or best of all, to a restaurant where he'd include you in the snack, Duke Siebert's, driving through Georgetown. And it was great fun. After about 3 months of this, and I was totally intimidated by this powerful, handsome-looking man with a Barrymore profile and these great white shafts of hair and this mellifluous voice. And I worked up the courage to ask him a question. I said, Father, how do you reconcile being a Dominican priest with owning this great big blue Cadillac limousine? There was a pause. From the back seat of the car, he said, Son, it's blue for the Blessed Mother. Nothing more was said. How dare I ask such a question?